What is more important for you? The cost of maybe alienating some people intellectually with the big words, sort of indirectly discouraging them from wanting to continue to read the in-depthness of your eloquence? Or is it more so, you wanting to get the message across and maybe even dumb it down to a certain extent?
Well, that's
because there's a cost.
Yeah, of course.
To both
That's a very
sides.
fair question.
Yeah.
Most people, when they read, they look up 1 out of every 20 or 30 words that they come across that they don't know. You just skip over it, you know? So a reader always has the option of skipping over.
All right, so this book touches on political correctness, wokeness, cancel culture. Would you say those are like the...
Well, I would say, I don't know how far you got into it. It's a large book. The last part of the book is on academic freedom. What I think should and shouldn't go on in the classroom, and how a professor should or should not acquit himself or herself outside the classroom.
And how it relates to you specifically as well.
Yes, and how it, caused me. I wanted to look back on what happened to me, and to try to be objective. Was I fairly treated or not?
And you said it in a very short length as well. The majority of the book was not about you.
Yeah, I didn't.
Just a very small section at the end, right?
I had two choices, or two options. One was to go into deep detail about my tenure case, and the other was not to. I chose not to. I have sitting in my other room, in my bedroom, I have huge folders I could show you on my tenure case. And when I came to that part of the book, which was the conclusion to part two is in academic freedom, originally I intended I would go through all the details of my case. And I pulled down the folders. And I started looking at it. It was very painful to read.
Gotcha.
And I thought to myself, number one, physically, can I do this? I was very doubtful. And number two, does anyone really care about what this non-entity professor at this non-entity institution did to me, or that professor, this or that professor? I said, you know what? I worked hard in this book. I tried to raise the level of discussion of these issues to a higher level. Am I now going to drag the whole thing down by dragging my book through the mud of my tenure case? I decided not to. So what I did, as I suspect you know, is I simply stated what I reproduced in full, the letter by the president of DePaul University, and then I reproduced the, as it were, reply of one of the top scholars in the field who couldn't be accused of being my political partisan because he's a conservative Republican.
Gotcha, yeah.
And then I said, basically, let the reader decide.
Yeah, no, I think that was very good. You made it a bit more universalistic, which isn't always good per se, but I think in this instance it is. In art and music, you probably want to be more detail-oriented, so listeners can be more relatable. But the way you did it, it's almost as if you threw a fishing hook, the bait, and now anybody who is really interested in this, they can come in and delve into your background more. My question is all of the pertinent knowledge to your case publicly available, or is this some of it?
No.
Okay.
There was what's called a non-disclosure agreement
Gotcha.
that you have to sign. There was a settlement in my case, a financial settlement, the exact terms of which I'm not allowed to publicly state. And then there is an agreement that you don't, the expression is, you don't defame or disparage each other in public. So I exercised, and a certain amount of discretion, and also I didn't want to go through it.
The non-disclosed information that shall forever remain reserved and secret, is it very potent information? Or is it just semantics and going through the process? Maybe, I don't know if you're allowed to talk on it.
It's not going to change the verdict on the case. The verdict on the case is dependent on what I do in the last chapter of the book, which is I go through all these cases of professors who were denied tenure, whose tenure was taken away from them, and to try to consider were these valid or invalid cases. So some of them you would know. There was Bertrand Russell, one of the greatest philosophers in the 20th century. He was supposed to teach at City College of New York, and his position was, his appointment was reversed on the grounds that his moral views, his moral views were immoral. So I look through the case very carefully to see whether or not those were valid grounds for denying him his appointment. Then I look at the case of Angela Davis, who first came to public notoriety when she got a position teaching philosophy at UCLA, and then the then governor of UCLA, Ronald Reagan, carried on a vendetta to deny her appointment at UCLA, first because she was a member of the Communist Party, and second because she was active in radical black politics of the time, the Black Panthers and so forth. So I go through these cases and then I leave it to the reader to decide. I mean, I express my opinion for sure, but I leave it for the reader to decide whether the grounds that were used against these professors to deny them their opportunity to teach, whether those grounds were valid. And therefore I felt that by the end, the reader was in a position to judge whether the grounds to deny me the right to teach were valid.
Beyond the judgment though, the non-disclosed information and knowledge therein, does it contribute to a person studying and actually understanding the process more in depth so that they can then counter the means by which such things occur? Really, because why would it be non-disclosed to begin with? It's kind of like, what is the value in the non-disclosure that's not being
Listen, let me tell you something.
Sorry.
Henry Kissinger said one thing in his life which was probably true. He said, the battles in academia are so vicious because the stakes are so puny. And if you go through any tenure case, they're always so ugly. They're so stupid, you know. The investment of time and energy in these appointments, most of the professors are complete non-entities. They wrote their doctoral dissertations in the most meaningless, ephemeral, minute subject matter. But they have such high opinions of themselves. You know, everybody loves to exercise power. So you get to exercise power over the tenure candidate.
Yeah, gotcha.
There's nothing very interesting in it.
Sounds good. I see the book, The Inquisition of Bertrand Russell. So you've been looking into Bertrand Russell. I see that. That's good stuff. All right. Moving on.
Book I just wrote. I did, as most writers do, they send out a lot of copies to other people to read, to get comment, and also I submitted it to many publishers. And the reaction was very hostile.
Gotcha.
But I have to say, it was hostile, it was a generational hostility. Those from my age cohort did not like the book at all. there are a few exceptions, but I think as a broad generalization, they didn't like it. People from your generation, they're much more laid back. They're willing to argue. They're willing to discuss. I think in a much more calm way. And so the reaction from your generation has been basically positive. For example, now on the web, it's only young people, your generation, who will interview me. I've been on a few times with Brianna Joy Gray, who I like very much. And for example, in the last discussions I had with her were on the issue of abortion, because it's timely, obviously. And it was feisty, but it was calm, respectful. But try talking to a person my generation about the issue, a person on the left. I mean, they wanted to throttle me.
Your generation would be more toward the spectrum of religious ideology, whereas this new generation is more so agnostic and toward a new age way of thinking, or is it?
Each generation has what you might call its litmus tests. And in my generation, if you were pro or anti-abortion, it decided whether you were a liberal radical or reactionary conservative.
Gotcha. Wow.
And I was part of that, but now I've had a chance to reflect on it more, read on it more, and I came to an independent